Hello, and welcome to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show. My name's Bill Graff. I am one of the producers of the Curt Schilling Baseball Show, and I want to wish you all a happy July 4th. Curt is taking a little time off for the holiday. So for this week's show, we are going to show you a conversation between him and Hall of Fame writer Peter Gammons. We picked this part of the conversation up with Curt talking about the influx of Latino baseball players into Major League Baseball and the effect that it had on him. Enjoy the show.
I went to Mexico to play winter ball. I went to the Dominican Republic to play winter ball. I got a taste of the other side. Being in a country where you don't speak the language, and especially we're prideful men. We don't want to be embarrassed. I mean, nobody does, but for the most part, we're usually at the head of the line, and people are recognizing it. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. It's no different for them, and I think it speaks volumes that there are organizations who have led the charge. Guys like Theo Epstein, who was so far ahead of his time, who said, you know what, we owe it to these young Latin players to start educating them when they come here in the English language. They don't have to interview in English if they don't want to, but it doesn't do us any good not to have them comfortable in an environment they're going to be in every single day of the year. And especially the guy, you look at Soto and Machado and guys like that, who I don't know. It's one of my regrets. I can tell you that. One of the things, very few regrets in life, is that I didn't learn Spanish immediately before I started playing baseball. I didn't take it in high school because I think it would have made a tremendous impact on me because it commands respect with the Latin players. When you take their language, same thing. I learned some Japanese when Daisuke came over. And the media was like blown away when I answered a couple questions in Japanese. But I got to learn. It was a respect thing. You care enough about your teammates and you respect them enough to at least try and create an accepting and warm culture. And that teams have gone out of their way now to make sure because I try to explain to people, Pete, people don't understand. Yeah, a guy like Yasiel Puig, he's in Cuba on Sunday, living in a dirt hut, even though he's a phenomenal star for the Cuban team. And on Monday, he's got $55 million in the bank and he's in Hollywood. Human beings are conditioned to adjust to that. And it's not fair to expect them to. And not only is he in LA Monday in Hollywood, Pete, he's being held to the same standard that white players and other players that know the language are being held to.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I thought one thing that I really respect what Alex Cora did with Yoshida coming over.
Yep.
I mean, he came over a little bit early, and they had a Super Bowl. Alex and Kike Hernandez had a Super Bowl party, and they had him over, and they had all the Puerto Rican food, and they all Alex has spent a great deal of time communicating with him. And one of the players said to me, "It's amazing. They can talk to each other. One can talk Japanese, and the other can talk Spanish or English, but somehow they've spent so much time together, they can communicate without the language in its entirety." And it takes time.
Right.
It's something, but I mean, it's also, Alex said to me, "Well, that's part of my job."
Right.
To get the most out of the people that I have with me, no matter what their backgrounds.
I won't be able to convey this to people, and it's something that I'm going to put the Houston Astros stuff aside. Alex Cora is one of the best baseball people I've ever known, and Alex Cora. I always tell people, they talk about the Houston cheating incident and all the things that go with that. Alex Cora and Craig Counsell were the two best players I ever played with on the bench at doing the extra thing, spotting a pitcher, tipping his pitches, seeing a hitter doing things. They had baseball IQ that was through the roof, which is part of the reason why their careers were as long as they were, even though they were never everyday players in the truest sense of the word. Their value to the club was far beyond what they did while they were on the field, and they were very good players at what they did as well. But I loved that baseball IQ, and Alex and Craig. But Craig a little more surprising because Craig was an introvert. He wasn't a big talker when he played, but he has the perfect mentality to manage and an extreme baseball IQ. And I always said that about Alex. Was one of those guys you could see it. He had it all. That the bilingual thing is, and people don't understand, that's not a small thing. That is not a small thing. American managers that speak Spanish are, in my opinion, way up the scale on the respect thing when it comes to the Latin players. Because that's, again, you care enough about me to try and make me feel like part of the team. And guys kill for that.
Oh, yes. Well, it was one of the things I thought that made Felipe Alou such an important figure in baseball history. Not only was he a great player, and he was one of the real giants of the early days of the Union,
yes,
which is really important to have an early Latin American player
absolutely
be very active in the Union. By the way, he had to manage during the strike with the replacement players. I was with him a lot in that spring training. He was one of the most miserable people for that time I've ever, because he was being forced to do something that was completely against what he believed in.
But shame on the owners for forcing them to do that too, by the way.
Well, that was not exactly a successful idea.
No. But I also argue, Pete, that 1994 Expos team was the most talented team I've ever seen that didn't win a World Series.
Oh,
wow.
They were, and they were, the thing that killed me was that it really killed baseball in Montreal, because they were drawing when they swept the Braves and a couple of other series at the end of July and early August. I mean, they were drawing 38,000 people.
That was such an insanely talented team, and deep. And I mean, my God, they were poised. I don't know how they would have handled payroll, but they were poised to be special for an extended period of time. And that was, I mean, I'm glad, because I was in Philadelphia at the time and they were a nightmare to play against. But the amount of players that went on to be special in other teams was unfortunate. Let me ask you about that too. I'm a firm believer. I don't believe Florida can support baseball. I've said from the beginning, I think the populations of Arizona and Florida are transient in nature. Everybody that moves to Arizona or goes to Florida brings their team with them. You know, when we go to Tampa as the Red Sox, there were more Red Sox fans by a factor of 10 than there were Tampa fans. But the transient nature of the population, I just don't believe they're going to be able to support a team in a meaningful way. Now, you can beat Tampa and scrape every penny and dime and dollar, and what they've done, I think, is amazing. And get by with a minimal payroll, but you're going to have to be lucky every year, like Billy Beane was in Oakland. I don't think that that's good for baseball, number one. But you saw the A's are going to Vegas, and you know, while I hate the fact that a team so rich in history, because I grew up in the 70s and the Oakland A's were it in the early 70s with Billy Martin managing Langford and McCaddy and Norris, and they were just ridiculous. But the city of Oakland is in a bad way. I love Vegas, what it's doing, what it's done. Although I think we're talking about, there's a hypocritical argument to be made about baseball, gambling, Pete Rose, and Vegas getting baseball team and a hockey team, but that's another discussion. Florida's teams, do you think both of those teams can survive? And if not, which one moves first, and where do you think is the next city to get a team? If they relocate, what do you think? Who do you think would get a team?
I think Nashville.
There you go.
There's a lot of money in Nashville. I know that there was a little downslide in around 2018-19 in the economy, but it's coming back, and it's a very diverse economy. And it's a great baseball town, and the college baseball has been huge. Minor league baseball has been huge. I mean, I can remember seeing Nashville play when Don Mattingly and Willie McGee were playing for them. So I go back.
I live 30 minutes south of Nashville now. And so I agree. I think it's a phenomenal. First of all, I think what the Nashville Predators done in the NHL is the blueprint for how you wake up and embed a community into your team and your franchise. And these are some amazing fans. Baseball is a big deal here. And I think, well, all over the southern, the Bible Belt, baseball is a big deal. And I think Nashville would absolutely thrive. Plus, don't they have Dave Stewart on that team of people trying to bring a franchise here. And that guy, to me, he was as money as it gets in the postseason. But I think he's a guy that could help lead So, hey, Pete, I want to close out. I want to ask you something. And this is a question. You don't have to answer it. I want a civil discussion on it. But I'm curious. You and I are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. But
Which
we
is
come
good.
from
We want society to have opposite
right.
ideas.
Right, but you and I come from the day when I was growing up where Democrats were left of center, Republicans were right of center, and there was a center, and you could meet in the middle on most things, and you disagreed on some things, but you could have a civil conversation. We're no longer there, and that's why these conversations are sometimes a challenge. The whole spiel around the Dodgers and what they did with Pride Night canceling, bringing it back. I want to ask you kind of a 30,000-foot question. What do you think about that whole thing?
I think they jumped out for reasons they were trying to be very good. There were issues with it that they felt they couldn't overcome. I just thought that they have to eat it and let it go. I mean, whichever side. Somebody said, well, there was nobody there. Well, they had huge attendance, but they didn't have the huge attendance because fans were lashing out at the Dodgers or whatever. They worry too much. I mean, the Red Sox had a pitcher that they signed to a minor league contract.
Yep.
They didn't realize that he had written some offensive tweets
when he was 13.
And it became a major source of embarrassment in Boston. And I don't know. I think that they should have known about it.
I don't want you to go at like. I was just curious about your thoughts topically. I say this too, and I'm wondering if you believe this as well. I've always told fans the only thing owners hate worse than losing money is bad press, and there is no upside. And I understand it's California and they're very progressive and liberal and Pride Night this and whatever, but you have a product you don't need to oversell in LA. That's a franchise people are going to come watch. The other stuff, the inclusive stuff, you know what? I don't know many fans, if any, that go to the baseball game to have their lifestyle choices Pride Night. You know, I get bring your pet to the park night. Everybody loves dogs, but this stuff to me, that's not what the game. I don't go, and I never felt people didn't come to a game to hear Curt Schilling's opinion of the presidential race. You know, first of all, they didn't care, and secondly, the amount of money these families are paying for the experience these days is dramatic and impactful. Give them the product sells itself. We don't I mean, as cool as the Savannah Bananas are, Major League Baseball sells itself because you'll never see it done faster, stronger, more intense, and more athletically than you will in the big leagues. That's the product sells itself. It always has. And so one last question. I was mad. Baseball has always been the only professional sport without a clock. Now, I think that the timelessness of it, to me, is the magic. I was mad with the pitch clock. I said, with the pitch clock, Kirk Gibson's moment doesn't happen. Joe Carter's moment doesn't happen. And you can start listing off these because I can remember the Vince Scully dragging the Gibson at bat out. And I can hear him calling that. And it felt like a 10-minute experience. Well, there were about 15 pitch clock violations all throughout that at bat, if you're talking about it. But like the wild card, I was wrong in the sense that games are now like 30 to 40 minutes faster. I don't know if that's making more people go to the game, but I know the intent behind the rule worked. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's generally worked pretty well. I do worry about pitchers, some pitchers who didn't do it in the minor leagues and are very nervous about it, almost becoming like rapid fire, like you're at a carnival and you're firing at Kewpie dolls or something.
Yeah,
I mean, I worry about them hurting themselves, trying to work too fast and too rapid fire.
I mean, never thought about that. I honestly, Pete, I didn't think about that when it happened because I would have never had a pitch clock violation for the most part because I got the ball back and I threw. I would have been Max Scherzer in spring training. If you watch Max, you know, he tested the clock, tried to figure out how he could manipulate it, tried to figure out how he could implement and use it as a strategy. I like that. I would have approached that. But as a young player, man, I remember I just wanted to get an out. Now I've got to worry about a ball or a balk or you know, that added an element. I didn't think about that when it first started, but absolutely, I think that's a part of it.
And I also think, you know, who would have been hurt by it, even though he worked quickly, was Greg Maddux. I remember
Absolutely.
doing a piece on him and how his catcher, he didn't give, he gave the Curt gave, excuse me, Greg gave the signs,
Right.
but he wanted the catcher to get it back to him in 2 seconds. He wanted to control the pace of the game. But he used to say to me, what was really important was knowing when to then go around the back, fiddle around with a rosin bag, walk around the mound a little bit, and then just screw up the hitter's timing and make them mad. What's he doing now? And then come back and go back to it again.
Yeah.
And he was the master of almost like being an orchestra leader.
Well, I understood early on from guys like Maddux, tempo was part of my arsenal. I could work as fast or as slow as I needed to. And again, I worked pretty rapidly, but I knew, and in my notebook, I had it specific hitters that like to draw and bat out. Those are the guys I would push, and I would be on the mound ready to throw. And they, you know, I would be they'd call time. Those are the guys who I wanted to mess with their tempo. And then the guys who would try to play me out, I just knew, hey, this bat's going to take a longer, take a breath and work it. And I specifically called out those guys for myself because I knew, and you know this as well, there were umpires who did not like specific hitters. And I knew that when I had that umpire and that hitter, that my strike zone went from 17 to maybe 25 inches. And you know, before Questek and all the other stuff, I can manipulate that and use that. And that, to me, was an advantage in tempo. But now everybody's tempo is the same. Everybody's tempo happens within 20 seconds. And the point you made, I never thought about the cardio conditioning of having to throw every 20 seconds. I usually did anyway, which is why it's funny, because when I see highlights of myself, I'll see myself breathing heavily, like I'm running in a sense. It was because of my pace. Other guys, like you said, they work through the minor leagues and they're doing, you know, well, now that the pitch clock has come on and the minor leagues has helped, but they come up through the minor leagues with 30, 45 seconds between pitches. Now they're in the big leagues in the most stressful environment of their life, and they got to do it in half the time. I don't know how that works.
You know, something you said, which I think it speaks very highly of baseball and why the game itself will supersede a lot of adjudication and so forth. You think about there were guys that umpires didn't like. Well, two of the most tempestuous personalities and great hitters in the history of the game were Ted Williams and Barry Bonds. And I do believe they're right there at the top of most walks in baseball history.
Yep.
So it didn't matter if the umpires liked them or not.
The other one was, for me, was Paul O'Neill. I loved competing against Paul O'Neill. Every at bat was an experience, but I don't know that he, in his entire career, I don't think Paul O'Neill ever took a strike. I think if he took it, it was absolutely a ball. But that was one of those guys too. But yeah. So listen, Pete, absolutely a pleasure. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out. I know I took more of your time than I probably should have, but
no, that's fine. And I've sometimes, and you'll hear from me about this, but I think it's fascinating, the war between the theories of swing and miss and the 98-mile-an-hour fastball and the ability to get outs before you need the swings and misses from the bullpen in the 8th and 9th innings. Command, it's what George Kirby of the Mariners, who's one of my favorite pitchers, says: C&C, command and control.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember talking to you about it, talking to Buck Showalter about it, how you would just throw nothing but fastballs until the 7th inning. Of course, you had 6 different fastballs, right. So it was a little different than some guys.
I've always taught command and control. Control is the ability to throw strikes. For the most part, everybody in the big leagues can do that. Command is the ability to manipulate the ball in 4- and 6-inch increments around the strike zone, because that 95 under your armpits in the upper right corner of the strike zone is a completely different pitch than the 95 on the black down and away. And so I understood, like, and I studied Maddox. I studied everything about this guy, and I studied and talked to all of them. And I understood the fastball, when I was right, was 6 pitches, wasn't 1. I can remember looking up in a game. I'll never forget it. I was pitching against the Giants in Philly, and I was in the 5th inning or 6th inning, and I had 54 pitches, and I had not thrown a breaking ball. And we were winning 2-0. And I looked over at Dutch, and I said, hey, maybe we should mix in a breaking ball. And he grabbed me by the top of the head, and he spun my head towards the scoreboard. He goes, that'll tell you when you fricking throw a breaking ball. Otherwise, you just do what I tell you to do. Pete, and listen, God bless you, my friend. It's great to catch up. You stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we can catch up again down the road, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right.
Curt.
Take care, Peter.
Okay.
Hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly did. Anytime you get a chance to talk to somebody who's been around the game, and he is a lifer, like I said, he's been around the game since long before I was born, and long after I retired. And always great to hear and tell stories of people like that. So thanks again to Pete and to Cal for making that happen.